Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and today we are doing an educational follow up to Justin's survivor story and to understand it a little better. And before we get into that, if you want to be a guest on our survivor story episodes, go to narcissistapocalypse.com, click on the guest form button, and we'll go from there. If you want to join our newsletter, where you will be able to get a workbook for this episode and future episodes, also go to narcissistapocalypse.com and sign up to our newsletter there. And also subscribing to our show helps out our show a lot, and also leaving reviews. So please do that if you can. You won't miss an episode or anything that is going on. And getting back to Justin's episode wasn't just about like one moment. It was about his relationship that moved quickly, where commitment, marriage, and parenthood happened before he really had a chance to fully understand the dynamic that he was inside of. And what began with promise and partnership slowly became something else. And it was defined by shifting expectations, financial instability, emotional imbalance, and the quiet erosion of trust in himself. And in this episode, I'm going to go through some core themes. We are going to be talking about the fear, obligation, and guilt and shame that Justin had to live with in this episode. We're going to do our analogy like we always do. And for those of you that didn't listen to Justin's episode yet, you can always listen to Justin's episode. But to give you more context than what I just said, Justin shared his experience of entering a relationship with his second wife that quickly progressed into engagement, marriage, parenthood. And from early on, Justin noticed moments that left him really uncertain. Didn't know if these were overreactions. There was tension around finances, subtle shifts in control that were really difficult to name over time. And Justin was a team player. He believed in the partnership. He believed in showing up and supporting his family and working through challenges. And I'm sure a lot of you out there can, really feel what Justin went through, and that it happened with you as well. And over time, the pressure increased. Justin found himself adapting to this instability, carrying household responsibility, financial responsibility. Everything was going so fast, losing just clarity of what was going on. Isolation grew, and the partnership became unequal at a certain point. And eventually, Justin discovered the extent of the financial control, and because of that financial control, that instability, and he was forced to confront the reality of what had happened. And that was a big moment when that happened, that he just saw what was really going on under the surface, where he didn't have money, the household didn't have money, but his partner was spending and spending and spending. His retirement funds were dwindling without his knowledge. And then eventually there became the legal separation, and really the beginning of reclaiming of his stability, identity, and trust in himself. And when relationships move really quickly, like this one did, clarity doesn't really come until later. And Justin still had commitment to being a good dad to the son that he had previously before this marriage, and to the daughter that he had inside of it. And the responsibility to all of these things really created these incentives for him to make things work during the relationship. Even if things were off, he wanted to make sure things worked, and he was a team player. And that was a big part of Justin's story, and it became difficult to recognize and difficult to leave once you're inside it. And I think Justin validated a lot of people's stories to the people that listened to Justin's story this week, and he did a really good job. So, I'm going to be hammering home points like I always do. A big theme for Justin in Justin's story was rushed commitment, and this limited the clarity of what was going on. Things were going fast. He was in love. Both families were meshing with each other, his son, her daughters. And when things are being rushed, Things are progressing quickly. And for him, engagement, marriage, parenthood happening very, very quickly. It's hard to really realize what's going on and to make, not just sound decisions, but you're able to forgive certain things because things are moving and things are just moving really fast. It's hard to see the patterns before they fully become visible. Another big thing for Justin was in his key themes that there was these hidden rules and shifting expectations. And Justin entered the relationship, believing that there could be shared responsibility, mutual effort. And over time, expectations shifted. There wasn't really clear communication about it. And he found himself adapting constantly and trying to stabilize something that was not secure at all. So as things are shifting underneath you, he's filling the gaps. He's a team player. These things are shifting and constantly moving, and he's trying to make everything secure. Another key theme here is financial control and the delayed discovery. And he trusted his partner, gave the partner all of the finances to do his accounts, everything, joint accounts, and he trusted them. So he wasn't really looking. And that's when, a lot of money wasn't going to the household anymore. And he couldn't understand eventually why they never had money. And she was spending the money, and she was also spending stuff that was from previously, before they even got married. His retirement accounts really started to dwindle. And when you put your trust in someone like that, especially after only a short amount of time, you don't really know that person really well. And this person wasn't a team player like he was. And another key theme is his partner became really the truth teller of his world. And it was really their world. And he was just living in it. So his opinions really didn't matter. Her views on things took over, and which brought in shame. It brought in guilt. Her view on his friends isolated him further. All of a sudden, her friends are his friends, and he's really, losing part of himself and conforming and really taking himself out of being able to contact people, get support, supporting himself, because all of a sudden he thinks everything he's been doing is wrong, or he can fix it, or I'll be better because I am a team player, which is a big takeaway in the whole thing. If there's any one big takeaway, it's he's a team player where you're going to pick up the slack. And if something's going on, I can do it. And he was really just putting fingers in holes to try to hope that the water wasn't going to leak through. And until eventually you don't have enough fingers for as many holes there are anymore. And eventually the water is going to pour out all over you. And that's kind of what happened to Justin. So as we always do, we discuss the fear, obligation, guilt, and shame of the survivor's story. And with Justin, these things didn't appear all at once. It kind of accumulated over time, narrowing his sense of choice and really reinforcing his role as the one being responsible for holding everything together. And a big fear for him, we're going to do fear first, fear of unpredictable accusations. So Justin never knew what would trigger conflict. Putting his phone down in the wrong way created accusations. Looking out a window created accusations because his ex thought that he was looking out the window at his previous wife. Watching television created accusations because he didn't know what was going to be on that could trigger his wife. Walking the dog created accusations because his wife was always assuming that he was going to be meeting someone while walking the dog. These accusations weren't about really discovering the truth at all. They were conditioning him. And Justin learned that normal behavior could trigger punishment. So he couldn't be himself anymore, and he just began monitoring himself constantly, and this is a form of control that kept him, really, really small. He just became smaller and smaller. And also here is a fear of financial instability. And it's not financial control we put here, it's financial instability. He was always put in a place where thinking that there is a financial issue going on in the home. So he's picking up work. He's doing his best to save. He's doing all these things that are taking time. There's a time thief thing kind of going on here with him trying to fix this financial instability, and because that's a big fear. You have to feed your kids, you have to feed everyone, you have to house everyone, while someone else is actually creating that situation. But because there's this fear of financial instability, it's creating this invisible pressure, this uncertainty that is going on, that is present, that is really present in the home. And it's trapping him to constantly be working on these things instead of questioning what is actually going on. And then there's the fear of escalation and emotional punishment. So if anything that he did was considered bad, there could be an escalation, or there could be an emotional punishment. There could be a silent treatment that would be going on. Accusations could intensify. Withdrawal can follow that. So he's becoming smaller and smaller and not saying anything as these things are happening, which is, again, a form of control. And then we have obligation. So the big one, as we mentioned, obligation rooted in his identity as a team player, obligation to be a good partner. Justin believed that partnership meant commitment, compromise, persistence. He took that responsibility very seriously, even when the effort became one-sided. And Justin saw himself as someone who contributes. He's a stabilizer. He fixes problems. So when accusations began, he didn't interpret it as like danger. He interpreted it as responsibility, as obligation. He believed it was his role to stabilize the relationship. So that's where the obligation came in there, which then became a form of control. Then there's the obligation to protect and provide for the children, to maintain the shared family structure. So Justin felt obligated to protect this relationship, to protect the children, to protect the family. He was protecting the household. He was protecting routines. He was protecting stability. He believed if he didn't do these things, it would disrupt everything. So all of a sudden, obligation here, it's taking up his time. He's not able to ask more questions. He's not able to question anything. He's just living and surviving. This obligation, this is survival mode in a lot of ways. And then we have guilt. We have Justin's guilt for wanting autonomy and independence. And he felt bad if he was going to do things that were for himself. He felt bad that he had friends that she didn't like. So that became isolation. These things become isolating, not just to the outside world, but it becomes isolating to your inside world. If everything is deemed bad, then you're trapped within this world that this person has created, which is their world. And another guilt we have here, if he didn't pick up the household slack and do his duty, and that just controls him further. He can do more, he can be more, he can pick up all the slack, put his fingers in all those holes so the water doesn't come out. That's a big guilt. Then there's a guilt shame for maybe looking at things on TV or people the wrong way, for putting his phone down the wrong way, for staying 1 second too late after work. There is guilt about that he needed to get home and do all of those things. So there's a guilt and shame of these things as well that are keeping this control of not just the things that he is doing or the activities that he's doing, but also his time. We've mentioned time now a second time here. So somebody being a time thief to his time, and he's so deep into it that he can't see how much time the other person has, and that he's always on a clock. That's a really big thing, and he feels guilt over it. And then we have shame, and there's shame for things moving so fast. And that was a really big one early on, and that created isolation and prevented outside help, outside perspective. Justin really didn't share what was going on early, how things were moving fast with his family. He knew it was off, but there was a lot of shame that was going on there that prevented his family from saying, maybe this isn't a great idea. Maybe, you should slow things down. There was the shame that occurred there. Shame prevents intervention, and it really prolongs entrapment. So that's the fear, obligation, guilt, and shame of Justin's story. In the reality of the fog doesn't trap someone physically. It really traps them psychologically. It reshapes perception, reframes endurance as responsibility. It makes survival feel like a choice when it is not a choice. Justin stayed because he was committed, responsible, and trying to protect this life that he really believed he was building. And it came with a cost, and it took a long time until Justin was able to get a little bit of clarity, and that came in the form of skateboarding, where he got his joy back, and that's where he really started to trust himself again. So the analogy that we have this week is playing a game without knowing the rules. So one way to understand Justin's experience is to imagine being placed on a team, but never being told the rules of the game. At first, everything feels normal. You trust your teammate. You assume you're working toward the same goal. When something goes wrong, you assume it's a miscommunication or timing or something you need to improve. So you adjust. You try harder. You become more attentive. You take responsibility for mistakes, even the ones you don't fully understand. But the outcomes don't improve at all. The rules just keep changing. Expectations shift without warning. And no matter how much effort you put in, stability never arrives. Eventually, like Justin, you begin to question yourself. Maybe you're not trying hard enough. Maybe you misunderstood the game. Maybe the problem is you. What you don't realize is that your teammate was never playing the same game as you. They had access to information you didn't. They made decisions that affected both of you without your knowledge. They operated under a different set of rules, rules that benefited them while leaving you responsible for the consequences. And because you believed you were on the same team, you never thought to question the existence of the team itself. And by the time clarity arrives, the exhaustion isn't just physical, it's psychological. And you're not just recovering from losing the game, you're recovering from realizing you were never truly playing together at all. So Justin's story really reflects what happens when trust, responsibility, and commitment are used to keep someone engaged in a system that they cannot stabilize, no matter how hard they try, because they were never given the power to do so. And what Justin's story teaches us, Justin's relationship did not become destabilizing all at once. It became destabilizing structurally through the acceleration of the entanglement. The speed mattered. Emotional closeness formed really quickly. The closeness created trust before patterns could be fully observed. Trust reduces vigilance. It makes people interpret instability as temporary rather than being structural. Then came the pregnancy. Pregnancy shifts the psychological framework of a relationship. It introduces permanence. Responsibility expands immediately. The brain will stop evaluating the relationship as optional, and it really starts to begin organizing around protection. Then came the marriage, shared housing, shared finances. Each of these added layers of structural entanglement. And entanglement changes decision making. So when someone is financially, legally, and emotionally intertwined, leaving is no longer as simple as a regular emotional decision. It becomes logistical, financial, and identity level for Justin, because he's a team player. So at this point, Justin wasn't just protecting himself. He was protecting a family system. And this changes how the nervous system prioritizes things. So instead of asking, is this healthy for me? The question becomes, how do I stabilize this? This is how the adaptation of someone begins. Financial instability and financial control deepen this adaptation. So when one person controls, obscures, or destabilizes the finances, the other partner often compensates. They become more responsible, more vigilant, more focused on maintaining stability. And this compensation delays clarity because the effort of Justin creates the illusion of control. If Justin could just manage things better, plan better, anticipate better, stability might return. But the instability wasn't caused by Justin's lack of effort because he tried really hard. It was structural. So over time, his nervous system adapted to unpredictability. He began monitoring things more closely, adjusting more quickly, suppressing his own needs automatically, not consciously or neurologically, automatically. And this is how survival mode operates. The brain prioritizes reducing immediate threat and instability. It suppresses long-term evaluation in favor of short-term stabilization. And the nervous system is really adapting to this uncertainty. And Justin didn't leave because the instability suddenly became worse. He left because he experienced a contrast. And that contrast was when he began skateboarding again. And he got that memory, that feeling of how good it once felt to just do something so simple and fun. He experienced autonomy in that moment, and the fun of that autonomy, and the freedom of that autonomy. And autonomy, you're acting freely without anticipating any negative consequences at all. And his nervous system experienced that regulation right there, and it wasn't experiencing hypervigilance at all. And his identity, which had been organized around responsibility, stabilization, and adaptation, it really reconnected with a version of himself that existed outside of that survival mode. And this created a comparison for him. And that comparison created clarity for him. And he could feel the difference. He could feel the difference between existing and living, adapting and being, surviving and being free. So once Justin's nervous system experienced safety and autonomy again, he could recognize how unsafe and restrictive the environment that he was living in was. And this is when leaving for him became possible. And Justin just reconnected with himself. And I think that's really important to hear about reconnecting with who you are. And once he reconnected with himself, he was able to have some self-trust again, and he was able to eventually break free. So what I hope for Justin going forward, and for many of you, if you're dealing with the same things, it's not just stability, it's just continued autonomy, continued self-trust, being financially independent. I hope he continues rebuilding his identity outside of survival mode. I hope he continues doing the things that reconnect with himself. Those things are restorative. And I hope he continues modeling safety and emotional stability for his children. And most of all, I hope Justin never questions himself in the way he was conditioned to, because the person he became wasn't who he was, and it was who he had to be to survive. And I hope he really gets to live again. And I hope that for everyone listening as well. So those are the things that I really hope for Justin going forward and for you going forward. And I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. I really hope that you enjoyed it and learned a lot from Justin's survivor story and was validated by that. And I hope you really felt seen or heard or got things hammered home to you right now in listening to this, from all these little learning lessons that Justin was able to provide through his story, for the fear, the obligation, the guilt, how this course of control here worked, why he stayed. And maybe his story is exactly like yours. Maybe you can take a couple things from his story, and maybe you can, get the inertia that you need to move and gain that clarity yourself. So I really hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you have a good night.